to the Jersey Devils Brocast here live on Radio Garden State, the best radio station in New Jersey. You could listen to Radio Garden State on Live 365, Audacy, all kinds of different spots and places. Recently changed to Live 365, which is awesome, as a great app. Just save Radio Garden State and listen whenever you want. And I am J-Bake here every Tuesday night on the Jersey Devils Brocast, bringing you Devils news, a fan show for the fans. And I got a lot to talk about tonight. I'm going to go into a defense of my captain against all you haters and idiots and morons out there. You're like, oh, just trade him. Anything's better than Nico. $11 million a year, you're crazy. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And you know what? I'd say 75% of Devils fans love Nico Hischier and appreciate him and appreciate what he does and what he brings to the table. But some of you need a little bit of a lesson, and you're going to get that tonight. Some big news on Jacob Markstrom. He is on the trade market right now. Some of you are very happy about that. Some of you approach that with a little bit of trepidation, as I do. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to trade him, but I think it's a little bit more complicated. I hate seeing the comments, anything is better than this guy. Well, okay, why don't you go look at the goalie stats around the league and tell me, is really anything better than this guy? There's a lot of things that are better than that guy, but not anything. I'm going to address the lack of depth in the Devils lineup and how that's why the Carolina Hurricanes went on and won a Stanley Cup, because of all that depth and pieces they have up and down the lineup and running at you in waves and having 3 good pairings and 4 decent lines and various goaltending options, and how that is how they won the Stanley Cup. And, you know, if we got some time at the end of the show, we're getting some other NHL news, some stuff going on. John Tortorella is no longer the coach of the Vegas Golden Knights, which was surprising. And some trades that happened today, too, with Ross Colton and Joseph Wall with the hated Philadelphia Flyers. But, man, you guys that are the hate against Nico, like, again, I most of you love Nico Hischier and appreciate what he brings to the table. I think Nico would have been a darling of the Lamoriello years had he played then, with his style, his game, his attention to detail, how he's not afraid to sacrifice offense for defense. I think it's great. There aren't many of those guys in the league. How many centermen win over 1,000 faceoffs and average 66 points a year playing against the top line guys on the other team? There aren't many. And as we continue into this offseason, which, by the way, this is one of my favorite times of year, especially since the Devils kind of sucked for a while, so we've been looking forward to changes and new things happening. With the rumors around Nico are swirling a little bit. You know, it's all speculation, nothing concrete or serious, or looks like Nico might be getting traded here, or this team offered something. All speculation, who would want him? Seems like Montreal fans are dying to get Nico. They trade you Cole Caulfield for Nico. They trade you everybody. Which, if they were going to give us their whole team, sure. You want to give me Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield for Nico Hischier? Yeah, I'd probably make the trade. But, you know, the betting man would say he stays in New Jersey. But like I just said, there's all these, you know, the speculation about where he's going to go. Is he going to stay in New Jersey? And if he doesn't, where could he go to? And all those Puckpedia fan GMs out there, a lot of them are making trades for Nico Hischier, which tells me something. That Nico is respected league-wide. A lot of teams desperately could use a Nico Hischier. More than you think. Just because he plays for your team and you could bring in somebody new doesn't mean that new player is really any better. Don't live in a vacuum, folks. Turn on the NHL Network. If you got Sirius XM, listen to the NHL Network once in a while. You don't even need to do that. Actually, leave Radio Garden State on all day. And, you know, once in a while, if you need a break, go on to YouTube. Listen to some hockey podcasts. Plenty. Daily Face-Off. Hours, of course. And you see, there's a lot of teams that are dying for a guy like Nico. You trade a guy like Nico, you don't work out an extension for a guy like him, you're going to have a huge hole in your lineup that you will not be able to fill. You could trade Nico Hischier for Quinn Hughes, and that would be crazy. we'd have one of the best defensemen in the game, one of the best offensive defensemen in the game. And that would be great. And now that would be a huge strength. But now a huge weakness is who are we lining up down the middle against Sidney Crosby? Who's lining up down the middle against Sebastian Aho? Who's lining up down the middle against Jack Eichel and those guys out in Vegas? You're going to go play Colorado? Who's going to be taking faceoffs against Nathan MacKinnon? How about in the East, Austin Matthews? Who's going to do that? It's not Jack Hughes. He sucks at faceoffs. Hopefully he's getting better. He's great at everything else. Cody Glass, he's a bottom six forward. You don't want, and he's not a bottom six forward as a John Madden bottom six forward where, yeah, he's your third line center ideally, but the guy's going to shut everybody down when it's on a faceoffs and, 40 points. But he's just a ferocious defender and you can put him out there against top line guys. Cody Glass is kind of just a nice third line player. Like, have some respect for what Nico brings to the table here. He's a fantastic 200-foot player who won over 1,000 faceoffs and thus far in his career averages 66 points a season and does all of this while playing against the top line of the other team. By the way, there's two other players I found who averaged 66 points in a season who I think are great comparisons to Nico Hischier. I'll give you all a second to think. Okay. Patrice Bergeron and Jonathan Toews, who've had virtually the same role, who won kind of are very similar in faceoff percentage, averaged 66 points a season. And yes, they had different trajectories in their career. Bergeron never won a cup as a captain, but he did earlier in his career. I'm not sure if he was an assistant in 2011. We know what Jonathan Toews did as a captain. 3 cups. He is the epitome of a leader, of course. Epitomizes that role. But Jonathan Toews also had a supporting cast around him that was substantially better than anything Nico has ever had. Patrice Bergeron had weapons and tools on his team that Nico has never had. But those are the comparisons. No, is Nico going to be a 100-point player? Probably not. Never say never, but probably not. Do I hope he gives us a little bit more offense like he did in 23 when he was a second in the Selke Trophy rankings, second in votes? I would love to have him have another year like that. But if he's putting up 66 points a year, playing 20 minutes a night, winning 55% of faceoffs, including over 1,000 a year, all while doing this against Sidney Crosby and Nathan MacKinnon and Jack Eichel and Austin Matthews and whoever else you want to throw at him, that's a hell of a player. That is a hell of a player that you do not just give up on. You do not just trade away for anything. And you don't. And I also hate this whole thing of that guys have to win cups right away to show they're a good leader. Here's another question. How many years did it take Scott Stevens to win a Stanley Cup? I'll give you a second to think about it. 12. 12 years. One of the greatest leaders of his generation. A Hall of Famer, will always be the official number 1 captain in Devils history. He eventually won 3 cups, but it took him 12 years. Played on some decent teams in Washington, played on some good teams, I think 1 season in St. Louis, 2 years in St. Louis. Great with Brett Hull and some great players. And in Washington, had some teams that were expected to do a little bit more than they did back in the 80s, and they didn't. How long did it take Kenny Danico? Was he a bad leader? What about Ovechkin? Took Ovi, 12 years as well? 11 years? Steven Stamkos. Been around a while. Knocking on the door. A lot of playoff embarrassment in Tampa Bay before they won back-to-back championships. Joe Sakic didn't exactly start winning right away. Some bad years in Quebec. A lot of playoff failures in Quebec, and then they moved to Colorado and things worked out. Lindros never won anything. All right, maybe he's a bad example. Not necessarily a leader. What about Yzerman? He was almost run out of town after we swept him in 95, and they lost in the first round of the 8th seed in 94, and he had to totally redo his game and take some steps back in his career to make an evaluation of things. And look how that turned out. He won 3 cups himself, 97, 98, and 2002. So this whole idea that, well, Nico hasn't won anything, so, trade him. It's just stupid. It's just an incredibly stupid, low IQ, just dumb, I don't know. I don't want to say like fanboy thing, but it's just so stupid. Like, look around. Go on Hockey Reference and look up all these guys and see how long it took them to win something. Is it Nico Hischier's fault that the team sucked in 2019, in 2020, in 2021, and 2022? In 23, great team. And you know what? Nico played great. The team played great, and they exceeded expectations. Had one of the best regular seasons in Devils history and went up against a playoff experience, a team with some playoff experience in Carolina that just, clearly had the upper hand on the Devils. Okay, but step in the right direction. Was it his fault that every goalie sucked that the Devils put in net in 2024? Was it his fault in 25 when virtually everyone got hurt down the stretch and he was one of the few actual legitimate NHLers remaining on the roster by the time they got to the end of the Hurricane series? I'll put blame on him for not stepping up a little bit more offensively when Hughes went out. I'll put some blame on him this year for not maybe stepping up as a leader and getting control of the situation. But we also don't know what was going on behind the scenes. Maybe he was trying to. Maybe it was from the top, from Fitzgerald, and what they were trying to do that just wasn't working, and there's nothing Nico can do to change that. That's not on him. That's on the old administration that's not here anymore. To me, Nico and Jack are the 2 virtually untouchable players. I will never say anyone is untouchable because, again, then you get the stupid comment, would you really say you wouldn't trade him for Connor McDavid? Of course I'd trade him for Connor McDavid. If Colorado was going to offer Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar for Nico Hischier, of course I'd make the trade. Come on. But to just trade the guy for anybody because, well, anyone is better. It's just so stupid. I don't know. And those are the same fans. If we just transported them back to 1998, 99, they'd be the same ones saying, well, Stevens won in 95. They haven't won shit since. We should get rid of them. They lost to Ottawa and Pittsburgh in the first round. How do you not tear this whole thing down? Come on. And then what happened after? If those fans had their way back then, they would have traded everybody away. Devils would have been rebuilding in 2000, not winning a cup. I can't stand that stuff, folks. You got to look around the league. You got to see what else is going on and see how some of these other teams are struggling, and also look at the best teams in the league. What do they have that we don't have? Yes, they have a Nico Hischier caliber player. They have a Jack Hughes. They also have a third line. They also have a fourth line that doesn't suck. They also are able to figure out goaltending, which we're going to get into later. But a lot of that isn't on Nico. He doesn't make the trades. He's not redoing the lines and the depth charts on the team. He can only control himself. And I don't think Nico's a problem. I think there are probably 25, 30 teams in this league that would love to have Nico Hischier. He's not the problem. And $11 million a year, which seems to be the rumor. We recently saw $11 million a year and like a midterm-ish contract, which I hope they sign him to the max. Midterm meaning, I guess, 4 or 5 years. But $11 million a year for a player of his caliber, yeah, he's gonna be one of the higher paid players in the league. But that's where he is. You're gonna get him for 7? This isn't 2014. He's not an entry-level guy anymore who is a restricted free agent after his entry-level deal, and you're going to sign him to an extension. No, this is a guy that's accomplished. This is a guy that's finished, that's been a Selke Trophy finalist. This is a guy that's been a point-per-game player. He's been around long enough. He's a year away from unrestricted free agency, and if you want to keep him, you're going to have to pay him. Because if he goes into next year, last year of his deal, and he doesn't sign either with the Devils or if they moved him, guess what? He'll probably get more than $11 million next year. He'll probably get 12 or 13 because that's the going rate for a player like him. I would love to see the fan reaction when Alex Tuch gets some crazy contract because he's one of the few good players this year. Nico is worth every penny. He's not the problem. He's worth every penny. This whole idea, too, I saw a few comments of, well, you get Larkin and you trade Nico. You can argue Nico is better than Larkin right now. And he's a little bit younger, slightly younger. I mean, in Dylan Larkin, and you know what, to an extent, Nico, too, just to be fair, on a cup contending team, probably your second line center, but the Devils have Jack Hughes. We have if Hughes was better on faceoffs, I don't think anyone would have a question of whether he was a top-line center, because every other aspect of his game, he's a top-line center. So the Devils are in a really good spot there with their top two centermen. I wouldn't screw around with that just for anybody. And that's my take on Nico for all you haters. All right. I'm going to have a beer. I'm going to calm down here a little bit as we move on into the show. The other thing going on in Devil's Land, and this is, I think, probably, I think my take on Nico really isn't that controversial. Again, most of you feel the same way. The Markstrom stuff, man, the fan reaction to that seems to be a little all over the map. But I think if you were going to pinpoint it down, I think we all feel the same way I don't necessarily have an issue if you trade Jacob Markstrom. I don't have a problem if he goes. It's who replaces him. Because there aren't a lot of great options. He has, Fitzgerald should not have signed that extension for him. That will go down as one of, if you're going to do a top 5 worst moves by Tom Fitzgerald, as of right now, that's probably up there. It was an extension for a reason that I just don't know why it was so necessary at the time. Markstrom was not playing well at the time. And Markstrom, his whole career has been up and down. You look year to year, there's some big changes here once in a while. Apparently he had some knee injuries last year too. There's a lot of reasons for why he played poorly. There's also a lot of reasons why a team would want to acquire him and say, the knee injuries look like they're behind them. Maybe we can get more out of him than New Jersey can, which is essentially what the Devils are going to be trying to do with another goalie. Outside of Connor Hellebuck, who didn't have a great year last year, but you can also chalk that up to Winnipeg just kind of being Winnipeg and not having a good season. They were one of the worst teams in the league last year. So now Hellebuck is, reportedly available to a certain extent. I don't think to just anybody, considering his, he has his own no movement clauses and no trades and all of that. And he didn't have a good year last year. .895 save percentage, better than Markstrom. 286 goals against, better than Markstrom. Won the Vezina year before, actually 2 years in a row. We all know the playoff struggles. His playoff numbers are not good at all. He was adequate and good enough in the Olympics. I wouldn't say he was outstanding, but he was good. Would I love to pick up Connor Hellebuck? Sure, but also Connor Hellebuck's $8.5 million a year for the foreseeable future. It'd be a big move. You can argue the Devils are better off going and spending that trade capital on a Hellebuck rather than a Larkin or a Tkachuk or whoever else. But the league is now kind of a goalie carousel otherwise. Right? The other rumored players like Binnington, Sam Montembeault, Elvis Merziklin's, man, I cannot say his name. I'm just going to go Elvis. If someone could please comment how to say it so it's almost like a Google thing. So explain it to me like I'm 5. Devin Levi, all these guys that are rumored to be available, but none of them have a big statistical advantage over Markstrom from last year. Binnington has 1 year left on his deal at $6 million. Again, cup guy. He's won a cup, but a long time ago. Olympic starter for Canada and was pretty good. Kind of like Hellebuck. Wasn't outstanding, but was good. Montembeault at $3.4 million for a year and was viewed as kind of a goalie for the future for Montreal. But is he a guy that's kind of like what we saw with Blackwood and Wedgwood, who kind of epitomized the modern goalie tandem? Two guys that traveled around the league, that have had very up and down careers, found a home in Colorado where everything just kind of worked out, and they had a great year last year. Goalies, though, are like good relievers in baseball. Like, you just don't know what you're going to get next year. It's hard to find one that can we get just 5 years out of this guy. There's very few that can do that. You got Vasilevsky and Sorokin and Shesterkin and Swayman, and up until last year, Hellebuck. But even guys like Ottinger kind of struggled last year. You look around the league and you just see the goalie situations, and it was tough. There are not a lot of great number one goalies out there. So finding a tandem and a guy that, the 1A, 1B, well, we have Jake Allen, who's solid, and was solid last year and gave you pretty much exactly what you signed up for with him. But could you get another Jake Allen, just have two of them and kind of just ride the hot hand, which is kind of what Carolina just did? Brandon Bussey did not have a great regular season. He was good enough on a good team, had a good win-loss record. His other stats were not amazing. Some were good, some not so much. Look at Vegas. I mean, they were having goalie problems all year. Our buddy Akira Schmid was in and out of good graces in Vegas all year. But when it came down to it, like Brandon Bussey, he was good enough in the regular season, but when called upon in the postseason, he stepped up, played his ass off. And is that kind of the new formula? I know Brodeur was recently on that one. I think he actually said that a while ago, but on that podcast with Schneider and Brian Boyle saying how that it's changed. It's really goalie tandems now, not one guy playing, 78 games, 80 games a season. So it's, can you find a guy that you think still has upside and you believe that whoever the future goalie coach is for the Devils can get something out of this guy at a better value than what you're going to get with Markstrom at $6 million a year? I would be shocked if that's kind of the move. I think, like baseball, it's sort of buyer beware, spending a lot of money on a closer because of how unpredictable they are. Sort of buyer beware, spending a ton of money on a goalie because they're fairly unpredictable. Outside of the guys I mentioned, pretty much everyone else has been a roller coaster ride their whole career. And maybe some had good years last year, but the year before, not so much. Some of these guys that were terrible this year will be bouncing back next year. And the hope is the Devils can grab one of them. And the other issue with Markstrom is, what are you really realistically going to get for a goalie that is coming off a bad season, that's an old goalie, who is now signed for $6 million a year for 2 more seasons? Are you going to have to attach something of value to that just to get rid of him? And again, now the question is it worth doing that? Where do you think Markstrom could be your reclamation project next year? Are you better off trying to do that with him than a Sam Montembeault or Binnington or Elvis Merzinglands? I can't say his name right. I just can't do it. From Columbus. Or, Devin Levi, who was viewed as kind of part of a future with Buffalo and then kind of fell out of that. I mean, is Nico Dawes your guy? I mean, he's been toiling in our system for a while, and he's had some good moments. Is he a guy that could kind of be like a Jake Allen? 90% save percentage, give you adequate goaltending at a great number, and now you can spend more money elsewhere and you're just going to put a much better team in front of them. And I think sort of like in baseball where we're seeing value in the bullpen outside of overspending for the bullpen, maybe that is the new age in the NHL of value in goaltending, and you spend your money elsewhere on more certain things, on a top line player, on some bottom 6 guys, on another top 4 mobile defenseman, those other areas of need for the Devils especially, where you're looking more for value than for just the biggest name. I think Connor Hellebuck would get everybody excited, get the people going. But is he going to really bounce back next year? And it's a long-term contract. Is that the smart move? Is it Connor Hellebuck? rather than the bold move, which would be Connor Hellebuck. Debate that all you want, I guess. I don't know if I even have an answer, because I'd be excited if they brought in Connor Hellebuck. But also, if they started next year with, they wanted to give Nico Dawes a shot, and they went out and acquired some journeyman goalies on two-way contracts to have down in the AHL as a backup plan, and then they built a really good roster in front of these goalies, there's a risk there, of course. The Devils in 2024, I think they would have made the playoffs if they had good goaltending. Good goaltending is crucial to winning. You cannot get away with bad goaltending. You can have okay, average, slightly below, but you can't have hot garbage goaltending and expect to go anywhere. So there's a risk there that would be the result. You're going to have, really bad goaltending there where you feel a little bit more comfortable rolling with a Connor Hellebuck. Montembeault is interesting to me because he seems like he's kind of on the way out in Montreal with Dobish emerging here. And he seems to be more in line with the Blackwood and Wedgwood and some of these guys that have been around the league, and they just put up good seasons last year. Carter Hart would be another one like that. Freddie Anderson's been more of a surefire thing for years, but injuries have always been a problem. But would Sam Montembeault be kind of that guy for us? Like, yeah, he's had his moments where he's been pretty good. We're not expecting him to start 50-plus games. We need him to start 41. Virtually split time and give us a 90% save percentage or better. And also, he makes $3.5 million a year. And, not 6 like Markstrom. But why would Montreal want Jacob Markstrom? And Sam Montembeault last year, his numbers were not good at all. It's his worst year of his career. But could he rebound and be the guy he was the year before? 901 save percentage, which would put him above or around league average. Finished 8th in the Vezina vote last year. He had a decent, okay playoffs. Like, is that, if the Devils could find a way to acquire him and move Markstrom elsewhere, I think that could make some sense. Buy low on a guy that's on the rise, right? Like the stock market. You don't want to buy something when it's at its peak and it feels good. You want to buy after it just crashed and ride the wave back up, right? Maybe that would be sort of that situation with Sam Montembeault. But the goaltending situation in general in the league, Devils aren't the only team. They're one of many. I don't think there's like clear-cut, comfortable answers, which is sort of more of my point with Markstrom, is there isn't a clear answer out there. Like, this guy is substantially better. He had a great year last year. That's our guy. I just don't know if that really exists. So it's sort of buyer beware. Where Markstrom has had, he's had great years in his career. Frankly, last year, he had some moments where he played great. The Olympics, he played great for Sweden. He ended up as the third string guy for Sweden, really. And he ended up being their starter. He played well. Markstrom played very well in the Olympics. So it's there still. So you can also argue, and I think these fans keep getting kind of shit on whenever they say this in social media, because it's easy to just crap on Markstrom right now. It's easy to do that. Take some stones to go, well, yeah, but he had played great in the Olympics, did this or that. And your odds of him having a good year next year is just as good as any of these other guys. You might as well just keep him. I don't think that's a terrible idea either. Again, it's not comfortable. It's not the clear choice. Fraught with danger. But I don't think it's a bad idea either. I mean, that's the way it is at goaltending in this league. You're kind of going into the season a little uncomfortable with what you have. That's just the way it is. There are very few teams. You got the Rangers with Shesterkin, Tampa with Vasilevsky, the Islanders with Sorokin, but even Sorokin cooled off later in the year. And myself and some of my good buddies, some people I work with that are big hockey fans, and we're reminiscing about the late 90s, early 2000s, and just the goaltending at the time. In the 2000 run with the Devils, just think about the elite goalies at that time with Brodeur, Cujo, Belfour, Waugh, Hasek, Olaf Kolzig. Guys emerging and coming up shortly like a Jaguar and Nabokov and Kiprasov, Luongo on the way up. And just kind of all the way through the mid-2000s, 2010s, where just this kind of top 10 of goalies were pretty good and fairly reliable. And it's really changed. But it's uncomfortable. Most teams will be uncomfortable with their goalie situation to start the year next year. And some of them will be uncomfortable for justified reasons, and it will play out as the season goes along. Other teams will realize, hey, things worked out pretty well. We shouldn't have been that nervous to start the season. Kind of like this year. There's a bunch of teams that way. That's the nature of the game now. It's the nature of the beast with goaltending. It sucks. And I miss kind of those elite goalie matchups in the playoffs. Brodeur versus Belfour, Brodeur and Waugh, even Brodeur and Lalime in 2003 when Lalime was playing at an outrageous level, and Brodeur and Jaguar and how that was such a storyline in 2003. Brodeur and Cujo in 2000 and 2001. How many? Were there really any matchups like that this year in the playoffs? I can't really think of many. I'm suffering from some short-term memory loss, I guess, but I can't really think of a matchup that's like, oh man, this goaltending matchup, this is mano-a-mano. And then you even saw Hasek and Waugh there with Detroit and Colorado in the early 2000s. Lundqvist and Brodeur, Luongo and Tim Thomas. Jonathan Quick and Brodeur, Quick and Lundqvist in 2014. Corey Crawford was sort of like the Chris Osgood of his generation, Devils legend Corey Crawford. Wasn't necessarily an elite goalie, but played really well and just did everything he had to do for that team to win. And you had him versus Quick and Pekka Rinne and all these other guys out west. You just don't have that in the league right now. The NHL Network and other NHL hockey publications have kind of covered that of almost like, what is the problem with goaltending now? So my point in rambling about all that is don't think that there's an easy solution to this. Don't think the Devils are one of 5 teams with bad goaltending. Everyone else has elite level goaltending. Almost everyone has the same exact problem the Devils have. We have 2 goalies that people know who they are. They've had a decent track record, but it's been fairly up and down and inconsistent. And it would be nice to get some consistency between the pipes. And it's going to be tough. That's going to be very interesting to see. And this is why I love this time of year, because I like seeing these changes in the trades and the trade ideas and the rumors and trade package rumors and who's available and who isn't. With the lead up to the draft coming up very soon, will the Devils trade their first overall pick? Maybe. I think a lot of us would love to see that, especially to get an elite player. What else will happen? What other pieces are going to get moved? Goaltending is going to be one. It seems like the Devils are well on their way of making a change there. But kind of in my next point for the show, I think what you have to do is take a step back once the season is over, the playoffs are over. Every league says this, from the NBA, NFL, baseball, hockey. It's a copycat league, which is kind of, I don't know, lame. I hate it when people say that. It's such a copycat league that, on the broadcast, you're like, well, Dave, it's a copycat league, and they went out and acquired. Yeah, I know. But, sometimes it's also like we have our own style of playing, but you can learn from other teams too. Everyone did try and copy the trap after we perfected it, and no one could do it the way we did. I saw it firsthand. But you should learn from the teams that are successful. And I urge fans, look at that depth chart for Carolina. Look at the depth chart for Vegas. Look at the contributions they got up and down their lineup. I think Carolina, in a lot of ways, they remind me of the Devils of yesteryear, where I think they do have a lot of really, really, really good players that just don't get their due because of the style Carolina plays. Seth Jarvis is an amazing player. Aho is an amazing player. Ehlers is a great player. Svechnikov, great player. But, this is more of a team style that they have rather than allowing these guys to just run and go. Like the Devils of yesteryear, like we saw with Elias, we saw with Gomez, we saw with even guys later on like Parisi and Johnny Mack and Claude Lemieux in the 90s probably could have put up better numbers elsewhere, but because of where they played, they had more team success. But the lessons there are, and Devils play a different style. They're built differently than Carolina. It doesn't mean they can't win, but they are built differently. But it's those depth pieces. Look at Carolina and the contributions they got from all the way down their lineup. Jackson Blake, 20 points. Stankhoven, young up-and-coming player, 16. Meanwhile, Aho had 12, Svechnikov 11, and Seth Jarvis 11 points, 19 games. Timely goal scoring. Guys just playing their role and doing it well. Getting a line outside of your top guys hot and playing well, like Taylor Hall and Ehlers and those guys. Jordan Stahl, just put him in the finals and the guy becomes Wayne Gretzky. But you have to have that depth and those layers in your lineup, which I'm very interested to see how Sonny Maeda addresses that with the Devils, because that's such a glaring issue. The Devils could go and get Jason Robertson and Brady Tkachuk, but if their bottom six is the same, the Devils will have a much better regular season. They will make the playoffs, but they might not go very far. Because that bottom six was atrocious last year, specifically the fourth line. The third line was okay. Would like to see it a little bit better. It'd be nice if Gritsuk could put up 20-plus goals this year. Honestly, Cody Glass did everything you could have hoped for last year. He was solid. Connor Brown was great last year. So, you know what? I'm not going to crap on the third line. You know what? Those guys actually were okay. That wasn't their problem. But the fourth line was just an absolute zero. And at times just sucked and gave you nothing. And I know it's a different era in 95 and 2003, but let's just, the blueprint is still so similar, right? Our fourth line last year was like Siplikov and Bukestad, Glendening, Cotter, Lemico, at times Palat and Stefan Nason. And again, Nason was hurt last year, so I'll give him a bit of a pass. But everybody else, they gave you nothing. Paul Cotter had some flashes, but overall, not a good season. Glendening was pretty much what you thought he was. He's not going to give much offense. He'll win some faceoffs and he can go on your PK. He was okay. Siplikov and Bukestad gave you virtually nothing. Lemico gave you virtually nothing. You can't win that way. And like I said, you can look at the Devils of yesteryear, and every time I bring this up, often I'll hear or see a comment of, so long ago. I think, yeah, but the blueprint is similar. The players are different. The speed of the game is different. The style is different. But the blueprint of building a deep team to win a championship is still very similar. The Devils don't win in 95 without Bobby Carpenter, without the crash line, without guys rotating in and out of that lineup and contributing like Chorsky and Dowd and Breland and a young Brian Ralston. Sure, Claude Lemieux was outstanding, and Stevens and Niedermeyer and Neil Broughton just playing some of the best hockey of his career, and Brodeur. But it was those depth guys, the crash line, that could play in a multitude of roles. You just want to go and stir it up and just, we're going to beat a few guys up for the next 30 seconds and get some energy. Throw out McKay, Peluso, and Holik. You want to play some good defense for a minute. Throw out McKay, Peluso, and Holik. You want to get just a good forecheck going. Throw out the crash line. We need some good defensive minutes. Let's get Bobby Carpenter out there to shut things down in the third period. In 2000, Johnny Madden and Pandolfo, Nemchinov, Breland again, McKay and Holik again in that bottom six. Stacking up against Dallas, where now you can throw out different variations of defensive lines and have different options. Oh, and they could also give you a little bit of offense. Johnny Madden scored 20 goals a few times in his career. Pandolfo was one of the best defensive forwards in the game for a period of time. We know what Holik and McKay did for years. Sergei Breland for years. Those guys in your bottom six, that's great. That's options. That's really good, productive minutes. They don't win in 2003 without Stevenson and Grant Marshall with the OT goal and him moving all the up and down the lineup. Marshall played virtually every role for you in 2003. He was playing with Gomez and Elias, and then he'd play on your fourth line. He was everywhere. And he's still everywhere now in the Devils organization. He's all over the place. Pascal Rayom stepping in when Joey Nieuwendyk went down. Mike Rupp with the game-winning goal and a great Game 7. The options on the back end, too, defensively, with putting Tommy Albaline in there and Tverdovsky. And, there's so many options. And, I think in 2003 and 95 were similar in that they weren't superstar teams. 2000 was kind of stacked. 2001 was fairly stacked. But, those depth guys in the bottom of your lineup giving you good minutes and playing competitive hockey, It is crucial in the playoffs. 2012, Bernier, Carter, Gianta, Clarkson, Ponikarovsky. Clarkson had a career year. He was in the top six a lot, but that bottom six and guys like Sikora and at that point in his career, Sikora, it was his last season. He wasn't a top six guy, but having him on your third line, hopping in with Elias once in a while in the top six to rekindle some magic. That fourth line was great. I mean, clutch goals and just checking and hitting their ass off and fighting guys and just energy line and winning faceoffs and good defense. And then all three of them can contribute on special teams. The Devils' fourth line last year didn't do any of that. Any of that. You can't win without having contributions in the bottom of your lineup, period. And it's not exciting in the offseason to bring in those guys. Was anyone excited when the Devils traded for Grant Marshall on the deadline in 2003? No. But he ended up being a crucial player because he's just a solid, good, reliable hockey player. And the Devils are missing that right now. I would love to have about 2 or 3 modern-day John Maddens in my bottom six right now for this team. Also, having a really good defensive centerman down there could help alleviate some of those minutes that Nico plays. And maybe put Nico in some better offensive positions from time to time to get a little bit more out of his skill set. But it's hard for him to do that when he's the only guy that can play against top-line guys. And he, like I said to start the show, he's great at it, but he could use some help. And that, I think, Sonny Maeda, we're really going to see with analytics and the new way of building a team, the experience in Florida. I mean, look at their last Cup team last year and just how deep they were. And Brad Marchand on your third line, and with Reinhart and Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk and Barkov and just Evan Rodriguez and Luosterainen and all these guys just up and down their lineup and all these options that are, some of those were superstars. Some of those guys are going to be Hall of Famers. Some of them are just really good, just blue-collar hockey players. The Devils need some of that. You can go out and acquire superstars, and that's great. That'll get people excited. That'll get people buying tickets, get some jersey sales up. But if you don't address the bottom of the lineup and make it substantially better, they're not going anywhere in the playoffs. A top-heavy team will get you through the regular season. A top-heavy team will score a lot, might get you 100-plus points as a team, solidify a playoff spot, but a top-heavy team gets eaten alive by Carolina. Top-heavy team doesn't make it against Vegas. You want to go through the war of attrition of the Stanley Cup playoffs. You better have some weapons deep in your lineup, just like Carolina did. And they just put on a clinic with that. You have to have that. And it's frustrating to see the Devils not have that because for so many years, it was almost the opposite. It was like, we need some stars. We needed the Jack Hughes. We had the other guys. We needed that one guy. 2014, like, man, those dark years. Going to get depressed here. But, like, it's like, man, if we had Kovalchuk and Parisi, we would have been a really good team. We had everything else. We just needed those top guys to just, like, be the engine of the train. We have some engine guys right now. Could probably use one more. But that's one piece that gets addressed while other ones still need to be addressed as well. You can't just do that and ignore the rest. And like I said, this is why this is like my favorite time of year for hockey. I mean, I think especially like, let's just call it what it was. Starting in mid-December, we were all started looking forward to the offseason. Whether we wanted to admit it or not. We all were. I was. I had some hope. I was trying to be positive, but I was looking forward to a breath of fresh air and a change to this roster to make this a more competitive team. And it's exciting, and I'm excited to see what Sonny Maeda is going to do here because the Devils have a lot of question marks. You can argue they could use a really good two-way mobile defenseman in their top four. You could use an Andy Green right now, right? You got Luke Hughes. I mean, a lot of questions on the back end here, right? I keep talking about the bottom six, but defensively, Devils need some offensive production back there too. Carolina and Vegas just showed the world. You don't necessarily need Cale Makar or Quinn Hughes to win the Cup, but you do need your defensivemen to perform their roles. Carolina got that with Shane Gothisbeer and Keandre Miller. Vegas got that with Shea Theodore and Noah Hannafin and Rasmus Anderson. They kind of just did their roles. They had some better numbers in the postseason than maybe the regular season, a few of them. But you don't necessarily need a pure number one guy. But if you have three good pairings where everyone is performing their role, there you go. And at the back end for the Devils, much like the front end of the Devils, they need some help. And the Devils' defense, I guess, they're on paper, they're rolling with 7 pretty good choices. You just wonder if the mix is off. We have some really good, great shutdown guy in Brett Pesce, physically strong guys in Siegenthaler and Dillon, an emerging elite puck-moving guy in Luke Hughes. Do we really need more big, physical, heavy defensive-men, or do they need a bit of a mix? Could you replace a Dougie Hamilton with just a really good, sound, two-way defensive-man? Could that guy be Nemec? Maybe. Maybe have Brendan Dillon paired up with a guy who's a little bit more mobile, physically, physical player. They can play a physical role, good pairing to just throw their weight around a little bit and shut down a little bit more, but maybe a little bit more of a mobile guy than a Kovacevic. And you need some size, but Carolina isn't necessarily a massive team. They're not some big, heavy team that just wore you down. They finished their hits. They played physically strong. They forecheck hard. When it comes to scrambling for pucks, very few teams are better. A lot of it's just compete. Compete. I mean, Stankhoven's 5'8". Jarvis is 5'10". Gothisbeer 5'11". Jackson Blake 5'11". Ehlers 6 foot. Aho 6 foot. This isn't some massive lineup here. I mean, just a good lineup, right? So, yeah, to that point, a lot of big decisions here for the Devils. It's 9:50. Man, when I go on a roll, I go on a roll. Time is flying. Just a quick note, too. I will be putting this episode up on YouTube, so please check it out. I'll be putting a link for that up on all of our social media. So if you're listening, go to Facebook, search Jersey Devils Brocast on there and Instagram, and follow us. Off-season is here, probably mid-late July. We'll be taking a little bit of a break from the live shows on Radio Garden State and then be coming back right around training camp. Doesn't mean we still won't be putting some things up once in a while on YouTube. But the live stuff during the week, we're going to take a little bit of a summer break. I'd love to say I am going on a little vacation soon. Going to be a lot of fun. But, once we take a little break from the show, it's just, it's the dog days of summer. Take a little hiatus. Then we'll be back around training camp. But obviously keep listening to Radio Garden State. Some of the best music around and best radio hosts around on this channel. But yes, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And when you see this up on YouTube, comment. Tell me what you think. Do you think I'm stupid? It's fine. Let me know. Do you think I make good points? That's fine. Let me know. Do you think I kind of made a good point, but I'm missing something? Would love to hear it. I interact with fans a lot on Facebook. I actually look forward to that. I think it's a really, really cool thing. I think our fan base is one of the best in the league. And trying to make a show here that, it's for the fans. I'm a fan. I'm not an insider. I'm just a big Devils fan that loves hockey. Has been following the Devils my whole life. I'm 37. I lived through the glory years. I have some perspective, I think. I love the stats. I think like most people my age, I remember a lot of the stats from playing NHL 95 and all that stuff from back in the day. I remember the players. But yeah, keep supporting the show. Now that we're finishing here, we're going to be leading up. The NHL draft is coming up. I love to tell you all that I am just a draft prospect guru. And I could just, fill you guys in on all kinds of stuff. But the draft is June 26th, 7 p.m., first round. Devils are going to be selecting 12th. And I agree with a lot of the sentiment around the league and with the fan base that, the Devils should probably trade that pick. And I'll tell you, there's a few reasons why I think that might be the best idea, right? NHL Tankathon has their prospect rankings, tier 1, tier 2, etc., and the rest. Some years are deeper than others. We all know that. 2015, 2003. Where you have tier 1 level guys are kind of your top 5, 6, 7, 8. Your tier 2 guys, which are, tier 1 meaning guys, they're going to be, core franchise pieces. This year, Gavin McKenna and Ivor Stenberg. Tier 2 guys, really good NHL players that should be among the better players on your team than kind of everybody else who, has a good future, but, might or might not work out. Has some upside. This doesn't exactly come out to be, and from what I've read online, now some people have disagreed, but it doesn't seem like the deepest draft. Seems fairly average. So that 12th overall pick might not be as valuable as some people think. Might be a little bit more valuable than other people think. But this isn't a 12th overall pick where the players available are going to potentially change your franchise. At least the projections. You don't really know till 5 years from now when these guys are in the league, for sure. The pundits and the draft guys are almost, it's just like the weatherman. Like, you're almost always wrong, and once in a while you just hit on one of them. But that's just the nature of the beast in the business. This 12th overall pick, I would imagine the Devils are going to get a very talented, very good prospect, but probably are not going to be getting another Nico, Hughes. I know they were first overall, but, those guys that are just going to change your franchise. Again, plenty of guys are selected between 10 and 20 that change franchises. I'm not saying it's not possible, but just looking at the rankings, how these guys have kind of been rated, and I'm not a prospect expert, nor will I pretend to be, but seems like this is a good year to kind of make that trade and look at that, especially considering we're in win now mode. This is not about the next 5. This isn't about 5 years down the road. This is about being a cup team next year. This is about making a run next year. This is about acquiring guys that can help you next year and the next 2, 3, 4 years. The Devils have made that switch, I think, from long-term to mix of long and short-term. You don't necessarily want to, unless you are kind of how the Lightning were for a while, or the Panthers, where you just are at the deadline and you just know we got a team that should be winning a cup. We're going all in right now. I wouldn't say the Devils are quite at that point yet, but I do think the Devils are at a point where I'm in full support of trading this pick as part of a package to acquire an elite player. If that is what you need to do to get some of these guys that we've seen in the rumor mill here that have been mentioned and are linked to the Devils, both officially, unofficially, whatever, yes, this is a time to trade that pick for one of those players. The Devils farm system is not great. They don't have the depth of tools to make these trades that some other organizations have, which also you can spin that as, well, they should then select somebody here and start building the farm system a little bit and maybe try to acquire those guys without this pick. I think it's going to be close to impossible to do that. And I'd really be looking into moving this pick to go really move the needle next year, because the clock is starting to tick. These guys are not 18, 19, 22 anymore. They're all in their mid-20s. We're entering peak hockey for Hughes and Bratt and Nico, and guys like Luke and Nemeth should be, if they work out, they're starting to emerge next year. You want to put together the supporting cast and get the most out of these guys while you have them, and while they're here, and while they're in this age range. Because when these guys are in their early 30s, you're really running out of time. Look at the Rangers. They ran out of time. They thought they had a team that was going to be built for a while. They weren't. They were not built for a while. And they're now rebuilding. So you don't know how long you have. So that 12th pick, if there was ever a time to trade your first round pick right now, I think it's the Devils. And maybe the silver lining from last year is, Devils have a competitive first round pick this year. They're not 20, 21st, 22nd. It's 12th. They were one of the teams that missed the playoffs. They're top half of the draft. You're actually going to get a good player. Now, again, these players aren't projected right now as being phenomenal franchise-changing players like we saw at this point in the 2015 draft. Because then you go next year, the 2016 draft was very different. Not every draft is the same. Some are loaded with guys where that 12th overall pick is even more valuable because of the type of prospects that are still available at that number. Some years, not so much. Some years the 20th overall pick would have been in a mid-second round pick the year before, the year after. That's just the way it works. I'd think of it almost like high school teams, or college teams. Like some classes you just are just loaded, and others just aren't. Some draft classes are loaded, and some just aren't. That's just the nature of the beast. It's just the way it is. But in saying that, can't wait for the draft. That'll be next week. I will be doing a pre-draft show, and we'll be discussing that at length next Tuesday. Hopefully between now and our show next week, there is some movement with the Devils and some news and some trades and a new player or two. That'd be really cool. That'd be great and exciting. But thank you for listening to the Jersey Devils Brocast on Radio Garden State. I'll be posting the episode up on YouTube as soon as I can. Listen every week, 9 to 10. Tuesday nights, Radio Garden State. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Follow us, message us, and everything else. So I am Jay Bake here with the Jersey Devils Brocast. Let's go Devils. And I hope you all enjoy your evening. Let's go Devils. See you guys next week.